Hey, everybody. Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast. We're back after 2 weeks off, which for us is a pretty, it's about as long as we've ever gone, I think.
I suppose it is, yes.
And we're back for any reason, not in particular, but hey, here we are at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Kevin McCaffrey. Over there is Adam Mamawala. How are you, Adam?
Oh, I'm fine. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving. That's in the realm of happy holidays, I guess. Like Thanksgiving covers more than any of the religious ones,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a pretty universal wish.
Yeah, and I still, because it's like the modern times, I still find myself saying like "Happy Thanksgiving" to those who celebrate.
Yeah, because you don't have to celebrate it. I guess the story
Right.
of Thanksgiving is a little fraudulent to begin with. So if you don't want to celebrate it, fuck it, don't. But it's a day off for the most part, I think. And you're hanging out in New Jersey with your family for Thanksgiving.
Hanging out in New Jersey, indeed, and I've heard, are hanging out with your pops.
You did hear that. TMZ has been reporting on it, and it's everyone's very excited that I'm going to hang out with my dad for the length of one football game. It'll be a good time. But today we've got on the podcast, we'll address a couple of the Cubs rumors lately because that's all there is. Nothing's actually really happened, I suppose, besides some protecting on the 40-man, some 40-man shuffling, which I cannot get excited about. I just cannot. I'm such a nerd, but I cannot get psyched about the just edges of a roster that's not particularly good anyway. Call me later. But then we're going to get into, this is a structured podcast today. We actually have a point. We are going to look back on our predictions for the year 2022 and I guess cover them and grade ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm. A structured podcast. Who do we think we are?
Who do we think we are? Half the other Cubs podcast? No. So yeah, what's caught your eye over the past couple of weeks of Cubdom since we've been off, Adam? I guess.
I don't know. I feel like it's this continued weird thing of like people trying to use what they hear in the media as justification of like the Cubs are definitely going to spend versus
there was a little of that.
Like, yeah, there was a weird thing in the past couple of days of people being mad at Matt Vasgersian for what he said about the Cubs, which was like basically holding their front office to account, which is what I would think you would want someone to do.
Yeah, because was it Morosi who was on there and talking about talking about the Cubs being in on one of the four major shortstops, which obviously should be like a very bare bones baseline thing to make this offseason acceptable, with two back-to-back elite historic shortstop classes, and we completely sat out the last one. So he was sort of talking about the Cubs being in on them, and Matt Vasgersian said, like, yeah, maybe it's time for the Cubs to stop acting like a poverty franchise who can't afford things. And it's like, yeah, I mean,
how dare he?
How dare he? We signed two legitimate free agents last year. I was happy with Seiya Suzuki and Marcus Stroman. That's good. In how many years of being an elite market team? I mean, it's been a long time since they've acted like a Chicago baseball team, like the Chicago baseball team. So yeah, people were upset about that. There's no reason we should not be giving the Cubs hypothetical credit for something they might do, which even if they even if they do that, it's just sort of law of averages. Teams can't sit out every offseason. I mean, it's hard to even give credit if they do go relatively big this offseason because it's like they just haven't in a while. That's the flow of just how time works and markets work. It's not acting how you should act. So yeah, agreed. And then I guess people were talking about Cody Bellinger, who got waived. There's been some rumors about him.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he's the exact sort of person you would want to take a flyer on. I think you hope that he's someone who just needs a change of scenery, but it's been, I mean, it's a very weird career for Bellinger. No, I mean, he was MVP, wasn't he?
Yeah, MVP, and just like an absolute wrecking ball offensively for the first couple years of his career.
What do you attribute his kind of, I don't want to say demise, that sounds a little dramatic, but like what did people figure out about him, or what happened that he's gone from that to being someone who is not even in the starting lineup every day?
It's a really good question, and I'm not a hitting coach. If I was, I would have been fired by the Cubs sometime in the last 10 years, statistically speaking. But if I was, and the Cubs did again fire their hitting coach. Greg Brown is out. They got a new one in there, so great, whatever.
But there are some people who call Kevin chilly. There's just something about Kevin. It's a real chilly vibe when you look at Kevin McCaffrey.
I actually do have some. I would say I have some Chilly vibes occasionally.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, he's got a very long looking swing. But then again, it's like, Griffey could have a swing that looked long, and it's like the most
Right.
beautiful swing in baseball history, basically.
Yeah.
Ken
God sakes,
Schultz,
Julio
yeah.
Franco played till he was 78.
Yeah,
He had a long swing and a long bat.
He had a long swing, long life. God bless. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts there, but he seemed like such just like a natural talent coming up, and he's sort of fallen apart. And I I don't want to say Hayward-esque, but I mean, there's some Hayward vibes there, right? Because the athleticism's still there. He plays plus defense in center and at first base, which is a bizarre combination, but would certainly be useful. And a left-handed bat would be nice. But I would be totally cool if they took a flyer on him. I'm not sweating how much money he would cost for 1 year, because if the Cubs aren't spending above the first line of the competitive balance tax, I don't care. They should use every dollar every year up until that.
What are people speculating? I mean, do you think it would be like, would a 1 year, $10 to $15 million deal get it done? Is that too much?
I've been seeing 15-ish.
Yeah.
I've been seeing 15-ish, which based on his last few years of production would be too much if you're just based on what he's been giving the Dodgers. But I mean, that's not what you're paying him for, right? Because if he's going to give you what he gave the Dodgers, then just don't sign him, So I don't really have a lot of belief in the Cubs hitting infrastructure turning anyone around. I mean, in terms of these sort of buy low candidates like Clint Frazier, Jackson Frazier now, excuse me, last year, and guys like that, they're just
the first name was the problem.
get it out of there. Maybe try changing Frazier. See, change it all. So yeah, I'd be fine with it, but I guess that was a rumor.
You know what I would like to see with Bellinger is something that incentivizes him to not suck. I would love to see like basically a 1 year deal that could become a 2 year deal sort of thing, where it's like you get a guaranteed $10 million for the first year. If you hit these numbers that we're throwing out there, you get a guaranteed $20 million for the second part, or you can opt out.
That would be really interesting. I like where your head's at. Like a $10 million guarantee, player option for $20 million in the second year. So it could be a 2 year 30 or the opt out.
Right.
But it's in the front office,
I know.
That sounds good.
Yeah, but the thing is, we wouldn't be welcome there because we want to spend money.
We want to spend money, and we don't have a personal vendetta against anyone who won a World Series with the Cubs before. Watching the Wilson Contreras talk about how just he's still never been engaged about anything, not even after the trade deadline, and Contreras said, like, after he wasn't traded, he thought maybe there would be talk there, and then there was nothing. It is honestly almost the last straw for me in sort of a passion killed for now thing that I'm finding has made it very difficult for me to stay excited about this organization, at this moment, to the degree.
Yeah, I don't want this to be like a bummer sort of podcast, but I do feel like there's a fairly good chance that what the team does this offseason is like a slightly better version of what they did last year, which was like, we are doing enough to make you feel like we're trying, but not enough to actually be competitive. Like, if I had to guess right now, and we'll get into this when we talk about our predictions for this past season, like, my gut tells me that the Cubs are going to do enough this offseason that there's a chance where, like, if everything breaks right, they could win 90 games. And if things break normally, they'll be like a 500 team.
Yeah. I think that's, with no real evidence to go on except for what the last few years have been, I would not expect a target above, like you say, maybe a 90 win projection, which should be, this many with a couple of burnt off years and all the money to spend, that should be, what we're looking at is basically a middle projection instead of a top. But yeah. So,
do you have any other recent Cubs news before we get into our kind of look back at what we thought would happen?
I don't really think so. Matt Mervis finished up a great Arizona Fall League, so that's good. We've seen scouting reports. Some scouting reports have come out on him, more recent ones that seem skeptical, but also some putting a Rowdy Tellez comp on him, or Daniel Vogelbach sort of comp, which are, those are real major leaguers. That's fine. Yeah. But also, scouting reports aren't necessarily real. They,
And have we slid into his DMs? Maybe we have.
Maybe we
Maybe
have.
we'll ask him himself. Who can say?
Yeah. Yeah, scout yourself, Matt. But yeah, so we might as well not waste any more time since nothing has actually happened. So
Right.
let's get into what our predictions were at the beginning of this year and
Yeah,
see
and
how we
right.
did.
I think as is always the case, there are things where looking back, I'm like, I am a genius, and there are other things
Hmm.
where I'm like, I should never talk about baseball into a microphone. So,
Hmm.
we let's just take it in the same order that we started with. We of course did this with our old pal Ken Schultz,
Hmm.
who wrote a very funny article for Outsports yesterday, talking about how nice it would be if the attention around no alcohol sales were in the World Cup were the same as the lack of attention around nothing that implies that being gay exists.
Hmm.
Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about Cubs team MVP. You and Ken both thought it would be Wilson Contreras, obviously a very good pick, and someone who had a very good season. And this is where I felt like a genius. I believe I specifically said like I don't know if I'm doing the Albert Elmore thing where I just keep thinking someone's going to figure it out, but my prediction is that Ian Happ carries over the end of 2021 into 2022, has a breakout year where he proves himself to be a star level player, and that this would be kind of his like 2018 Javi Baez season, which I don't think anyone would say that Happ's season was as good as Javi's 2018 season, but like
Sure.
he won a Gold Glove, he got to the All Star game, and I as far as picks I feel good about, I think I would be hard pressed to find a more valuable piece of the Cubs this year. Like, would you say that he would be the consensus team MVP?
I wouldn't say consensus, but I would say I think he's as good a pick as anybody, basically. You know, I mean, if you depending on how you want to judge these things, like if you look at the WAR leaders by different charts, like Fangraphs has Nico number one, Hap two, Wilson three, but all sort of within the margin of error, you know, and Baseball Reference
Right.
shuffles that around a bit. So I think any one of those three guys, I think you could make an argument for a team MVP. But I mean, basically, I would count that. I would count your prediction as right. I would count my prediction as right.
Mm-hmm.
I would, you know, it's like those were, believe it or not, the two guys who were the best players coming into the year were two of the three Cubs' best players. It would be
Yeah.
so neat to see that trend and then keep those guys around. And there have been some rumors about the Cubs saying we will seriously engage Nico Horner and Ian Happ on extension talks, or they haven't come out and said it, but there have been reports that that's the case, and I'll believe it
Mm-hmm.
when I see it. But yeah, I mean, Ian Happ got there in an interesting way too, right? He won a Gold Glove in left field. He made the All Star team, right? And
Yeah.
he made himself a much more consistent offensive player. Like the power dipped a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
the on base was there, the contact was higher, and just a really good player. You're happy to plug into that lineup and put over
Yeah.
there in left field.
Yeah, one thing that I got wrong specifically about the Hap prediction was that I thought the power would be there more. I predicted that he would cross the 30 home run threshold, which I do think is still something that he can do in his
Oh,
career. But I also
absolutely.
think
Yeah.
it's like I don't for someone like him who has struggled with striking out too much, has struggled
Hmm.
like weirdly with balls in the zone. Like I don't at this point, I think you just try to repeat what he did last year, even if that means a bit less power. Because I think if you're trying to emphasize like, hey, well, we want you to be the guy who hit 30 to 35 home runs, there's a chance that that throws off whatever else he's been working on that has gotten him to where he is right now. So, in my mind, you sacrifice whatever extra power there is for the consistency of what he brought from both sides of the plate. But
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I'm looking at his his breakdown over the years right now, and in 2021 he hit 25 homers. This year he hit 17 homers, and his isolated power, his ISO was .169 this year. It was 209 last year. 169 is the lowest of his career, but with that lower isolated power, he is, he still put up the best wins above replacement of his career, and
right,
that comes from just a bunch of different ways. But there are ways by expected weighted on base average, by isolated power, as I said, that this year was his worst offensive year, like in terms of a year where he's had this many at bats. And I think that's a great sign because he was able to
yeah,
stabilize this way, and we know that there's actually more there for him to get to. There is more pure
right,
power there. Also set a career high in stolen bases with 9. So,
yeah.
It was an interesting offensive season, but I think it's just like you just got to count on Ian Happ is a good offensive player. He's going to
Hmm.
get to good numbers, and he's still probably younger than a lot of people feel like he is because he's been around so long. He's
Right.
28. He's 28 right now. 28 years,
Yeah.
3 months, 11 days as we speak right now.
Hmm.
So
Also, you'll never convince me that Woba doesn't sound like some sort of person from the Star Wars universe, but
yeah,
that's a
well,
different story.
yeah. Woba's at the cantina. He's causing trouble over there for
Woba,
sure.
Woba the stat.
Woba the Stat is a sabermetric obsessed Star Wars character. He's beaten everybody in the holo chess. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our picks for due for regression. I think you knocked this one out of the park a
Mm.
lot more than these guys did. Your predictions were Rafael Ortega and our boy Frank Schwindel, and I mean, kind of hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yeah, and it felt kind of like cheating saying that because they had such good seasons last year. I mean, Frank
Right.
Schwindel won Offensive Player of the Month in the National League, and I wasn't rooting for this to
Of
happen, but
course.
there was just like no real indication that it would stay at that level. And obviously, I'm someone who has harped on the people out there in the Twitter sphere who just loved putting up Schwindel versus Rizzo war levels at like exactly peak Schwindel and exactly like just basement dip Rizzo and being like, see, we don't need him. Rizzo just signed with a smarter, better team than the Cubs again for a couple of years. If you're curious about that,
Yeah.
but yeah, I hope Schwindel has a great. I think he signed. I want to say, did he sign with a? Was it a Dominican Winter League team? I think.
I think so. And just picturing his goofy finger guns in the DR is extra fun to me.
Yes, but I hope Schwindel comes back because I do think he has some, bat to ball talent there. Ortega, I think, he's a fringe major leaguer, but the Cubs came into this year when you hear Jed Hoyer talk about like if things broke right, we would have been a contender this year. That's breaking right. You're talking about counting on Frank Schwindel to be an offensive juggernaut and Rafael Ortega to be like a top five leadoff man in the league. I
Yeah.
can't. He has to have seen baseball before. I know he's been employed, so that is why I chose those two guys for regression because it just made all the sense in the world. So
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my maybe my best prediction from our episode that we recorded in, I guess, March or April was that I felt that our window had turned into a schwindo, and I stand by that claim. Yeah,
yeah.
and for Rafael Ortega, like he does have some pop. He's like okay as a batter, but like if you want your job in the majors to be a fourth outfielder, you should be not bad at being an outfielder.
Yeah, that is the thing too. It's a tough. I agree.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a
Because
tough
he's not a
path.
good enough bat to justify just being a pinch hitter or just being a DH.
Yeah, basically you're looking at him as the left-handed hitting platoon. I mean, center fielder was the idea coming into this year, but
Yeah,
he's not a center fielder. I mean,
right.
this is a left-handed platoon, maybe left fielder, and that is just
Yeah,
like without much bigger power. That is a or some other like supreme standout tool, like
yeah,
80 speed or something. Like it's just a tough way to find your way on a contender.
right. And I think maybe I'm wrong here, but I would have to look at Ortega's numbers. But I think for a guy who profiles like him offensively, if he were a plus plus defender, I think he would have a major league job. I think if he
Mhm.
were a Sam Fold, Billy Hamilton sort of center fielder with
Mhm.
the exact same batting profile, I think you find a spot for that guy, even if it's like towards the bottom of your lineup, and you can live with like what he brings you offensively because of the defense he brings. But that's
Yeah.
not what he does.
No, I think he's a fringe major league player. I mean, his offensive numbers were not like horrendous last year. He a WRC plus of 96, which puts him 4% below league average.
Right.
But as you say, without the defense to make up for it, there's not a ton there. He stole 12 bases. Which is good, but he was caught stealing
Hmm.
a ton as well, which is bad. And then he ended up with a Fangraph score of .7. So this, he's a fringe major leaguer, but this is not a your leadoff man on a contender, and everyone should have known that coming into this year.
Right. My pick for regression was Patrick Wisdom, which I guess like was true and then wasn't. I think it was the same sort of thing where like it was an easy pick because of how amazing a year he had in 2021. But
Mhm.
in listening back to it, I think if anything, Ken was more on the nose with what he said about Wisdom, which is like, no, I think we've kind of just seen what he is at this point. Like he's going to be someone who is always going to have a lot of pop, but is
Hmm.
now not ever going to have a great batting average or avoid strikeouts. And what we saw with Wisdom early in the year was that he just couldn't hit anything. I mean, he got sent down briefly, I think, right, and then like immediately call back up, or what? I'm forgetting what the situation was.
Did that happen? I'm not. I think he stayed up in the majors all year, unless I missed
I,
it, or unless I'm
I
missing it right
could.
now.
I may be confusing stories with Schwindel. I think there was some
Right,
situation where
Schwindel
Wisdom
was sent
like,
down. Yeah.
but remember the thing where like maybe it was Wisdom got like sent down and then immediately called back up. It was like he left the team, someone got hurt, and then like went right back to the team. I can't
Oh,
recall who that was.
maybe I thought that was Schwindel too,
Yeah.
actually. But
Okay.
yeah,
In any
but
case, Wisdom continued to. My prediction was that he had shown himself to be someone who struggled with breaking stuff, which I think
mhm.
we've continued to see. But you can't argue with the home run, like the power numbers he put up. I mean,
No, it's he had 25 homers this year, and 25 homers in 534 plate appearances. That's just good. I mean, that is a good power bat. Last year he had 28 homers in 375 plate appearances, which
yeah,
is
that's
an
wild.
incredible rate. The upside is he dropped his strikeout rate by 6% this year, and he brought his walk rate up about 1.5%, which is significant. That is meaningful. But his on base is still. I mean, his slash line 207 batting average, 298
Hmm.
on base, which is pretty gross. And then slugging 426, which is fine given the other numbers. But the
Right.
thing that really hurt is his defense absolutely cratered. We came into this year thinking that Patrick Wisdom offered plus defense at third, and we kind of saw plus defense last year, and the numbers bear that out. But this year, Fangraphs has him rated at a minus 10.8 at defensively, and I mean that seems to match the eye test. He's
Yeah.
got a really plus arm, but he struggled throwing. He struggled with the glove. So that with all the strikeouts, which even though he cut it by 6%, it was still 34% strikeout rate. All the strikeouts in the world, and then not plus defense, actually a minus defense at third, then that is you're looking at a platoon guy at best, and that's fine. And I could see Wisdom more than Ortega having a place on a contender in that way. But again, this is not a guy. I don't think we can count on him to be a starter on a contender at the level the Cubs should be.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And then, of course, I want to save this one for last. Ken's pick for regression was no surprise to anyone here, Jed Hoyer, which also I think was right. I mean, if
Yeah.
you can't even flip a person that you have no intention to re-sign,
Hmm.
as far as I'm concerned, you have failed as a GM.
I can't think of a bigger failure than the Wilson Contreras situation this year because even though we weren't in favor of everything he did at last year's deadline, I think you could understand where it was coming from. And it seems like the
Right.
Cubs got who knows if they're good returns or not, but they look okay right now. Like
Hmm.
Baez for PCA looks good. Canario, who came over with Caleb Killian for Chris Bryant, that Canario looked great, and he had a devastating injury just now, so we'll see how he recovers from that. Killian looked promising, came up, had a rough debut, and then the other guy Kevin Alcantara, who came over for Rizzo, looks promising, but the other
Hmm.
guy quit baseball like immediately, refused to come to the United States, and then now is either fully quitting baseball or apparently only wants to play for the Yankees. So it's I think the
Hmm.
grade is incomplete last year, but this year the grade is an F. You had Wilson Contreras, who again started as the all-star catcher for the National League for the third time. And you had all year, and if you were unwilling to engage him at all in extension talks after you could not trade him, then why did you wait to trade him at any point over if this was your opinion on Wilson Contreras, who couldn't have done anything better this year? He had a good year, well above 3 wins above replacement
Hmm.
as a catcher. If you can't trade him and are unwilling to extend him, and you had a huge window to trade him dating back to last year if you were never going to extend him anyway, and you end up with a comp pick after the second round, that is a fucking F. Like, just absolutely
It's like
a
borderline malpractice.
terrible job by Jed Hoyer. Terrible job this whole year by Jed Hoyer. I don't know I mean, like, I guess you could say the Scott Efros for Hayden Wisniewski looks decent right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, like you don't get credit for sometimes doing something well
Hmm.
when you completely shit the bed in a very obvious way. Otherwise, I mean, like I do not have confidence in Jed Hoyer. Continue not to. So I will also give I will give Ken credit there.
Do you think we'll be invited to do a live podcast at the Cubs convention?
I think so. Yeah.
This is the kind of narrative they want, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh yeah. They would love to hear from us, I'm sure.
Let's move on to breakout star predictions. We mostly had a pretty rough go here.
Mm-hmm.
Ken predicted Michael Givens, who was kind of up and down. I mean, I guess he was good enough that he was able to be traded, but not really for anything other than a bag of balls, as it were.
Yeah, flyer.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you predicted Justin Steele to have a breakout year. Once he got a chance in the rotation to really break out and prove himself
Mm-hmm.
to be someone who was a mainstay, which I think he absolutely did. It was
Yeah.
particularly cool for us as people who consider ourselves his best friend. Um,
Yeah, who did when we
but
booked him when we talked to Justin on our show the first time 3 years
mhm,
ago. It was also, I have to say, partly because I contacted him because I've been a longtime believer in Justin Steele from the way he was drafted.
right,
He had a little bit of arm trouble, which let him drop to the Cubs in back-to-back fifth and sixth rounds. Drafted Dylan Cease and Justin Steele in back-to-back.
yep.
Dylan Cease, who finished second in the Cy Young running in the American League. So I've just always been a big believer in Steele and specifically as a starter. And I was very glad to get that part of the prediction right. My B part of the prediction was not correct, but my A part, I would say, very
Yeah,
correct.
you gave us an offensive one, you gave us a pitching one, and I think I did as well. I said it later in the episode, but like we both were very good with our pitching predictions. My
Mhm.
prediction was that a full season of Scott Efros would be great.
It
It
was,
would
yeah,
have been had he,
yeah.
he certainly in his time with the Cubs, and he worked his way into a point where he was so valuable and such a workhorse that the Cubs might have broken him. I've
Yeah.
heard some Yankees fans be like, well, when you look at his usage in the first half of the year. It's that's tough, but
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah. So
and that's true. But also, Brian Cashman has the box scores, so it's like it's
right.
the trade was not made in bad faith, and
Hmm.
Efros was decent until he blew his arm out, over
Right.
there, and hopefully he will be back and healthy sometime, maybe
Right.
mid-season next year. But yeah,
Hmm. But then you and I both predicted Clint Frazier to be the breakout star, which we fell in love with the good spring he had, I guess. But
yeah.
tell us how Clint Frazier worked out.
Well, I'll tell you how poorly that prediction worked out for us is he doesn't exist anymore. He, as we said before, Clint Frazier is no longer. He did not die, but he is Jackson Frazier now, and he basically did not get a real look at the major league level, which I did feel like was a bit of a raw deal.
Hmm.
He was up there very briefly, and he got 45 plate appearances and mostly like pinch hitting and stuff. The walk rate was as good as it has always been, which is very good. He's been known for having a very good eye, but I think although I wanted to see him get more usage at the major league level, once he was dropped to AAA, cleared waivers, and stayed in the Cubs organization, he just did absolutely nothing at AAA. So
Right.
hopefully, he gets his. Hopefully things work out for him from here, but it won't be here. I was really excited about
No.
the offensive
Yeah.
potential, but no.
Yeah, and I still think he was a good person to take a flyer on. It didn't
Yeah.
work out, but it was particularly upsetting, I would think, for him that he got waived like as the Cubs were coming to New York to play the Yankees, which was
Yes.
a place that he had not been happy in, and that I think Yankees fans were very excited to boo him actually, and then didn't have the opportunity.
Right.
Because what I remember of that is that he just felt like he got a raw deal in New York as well and didn't get a
Hmm.
chance. And I think that was right at some points. Like it was such a stacked team that almost anywhere else in the league he would have been on a major league roster, but kept getting sent down.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, he absolutely did not get it done in New York when he had the chance, and he did not for the Cubs. So who knows? Maybe Jackson will work out better than Clint. I mean, Giancarlo seems to be working pretty well for formerly Mike Stanton. So who
Whoop.
can say?
Sorry, music blowing up on my On my computer, baseball reference.
Oh,
Really, I was trying to look up a baseball reference thing, and they got a DJ going over there.
only the coolest DJs DJ at Baseball
Yeah.
Reference. I believe it's
Yes.
DJ Woba the Stat is over there DJing at Baseball
You,
Reference.
oh my gosh, they're playing that air horn sound whenever as soon as they introduce DJ Wobot the Stat. Yeah, so too bad.
But yeah, so I would say the thing that we did best, which also depresses me quite a bit, was our predictions of the Cubs record. Now, for those of you who were following along and watching the Cubs begrudgingly this past season, they finished 74-88, which is actually pretty good given how bad they had been.
Yeah, took a hot
that
second
involved,
half.
Yeah, that involved a whatever, they 39-31 in the second half, and they were still that bad.
I'll tell you what, they were 8-2 over their final 10 to get to
Unreal.
to get to 74 and 88.
Yeah. So 74-88 finished in third. Ken
In the worst
you
division in
actually,
baseball. But yeah.
yes, also important to mention. You and Ken had the exact same prediction. You both thought they would be 72-90 and finish in fourth place. I don't think I specified what place they would finish in, but I specifically predicted they would finish 75-86, which was one game short because they would have one game that they were too irrelevant to make up because of how bad they were. So I guess by Price is Right rules, you and Ken win, but by closest, I'll take it.
I don't believe in Price is Right rules. I don't know why. I think closer is closer. And so I do. So by
I'm with you.
So on percentage points, I think you are correct. You get the credit there. That's great. I'm looking at just how shit a division the NL Central was this year. 2 100 loss teams. That's tough to do because they got to play each other a bunch. So it's really tough to have 2 100 loss teams in the same division. I'd be curious the last time it happened. But this makes me just think back to some dope on Twitter who was yelling at us for calling the NL Central bad, and I remember pointing out. They had the worst first place team of any division, the worst second place team, the worst third place team, the worst fourth place team, and the worst fifth place team. So there's just no argument. They had 200 lost teams. Not one team in this division was as good as 500 away from home. The Cardinals were monsters at home. They were 53-28 at home, but not one team was even 500 on the road in this whole friggin' division. What an absolute mess and an embarrassment that the Cubs still did not contend. A couple years after the last time we contended.
Wait, not a single team, including the Cardinals, were 500 or above on the road?
Right. The Cardinals were 40-41 on the road. The Brewers are 40-41. Cubs 37-44, etc. So
I would love to know the last time that happened. That seems like that's something that has maybe never happened before.
That and the 200 lost teams in the same division is just like it is. You have to go through a maze of probability to get there. That it's difficult.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah. So anyway, one more year to punt.
Well, I mean, they
have to contend next year. But yes,
yeah,
anyway,
I'm very. I hope that by the time March rolls around, if we do another season preview podcast with Ken or just the two of us, that we will have a lot more hope than we do right now. But if I were to ask you today on November whatever it is, over under 81 wins. Do you take the over? I feel like I do.
I do too. I do too. Yeah. I think. I mean, and this is like you will listen to few more pointless things today than me trying to predict how many wins a team will have before anything has really happened this offseason.
Yeah, but it's like a feel thing, Yeah,
it's a feel thing, right? Exactly, based on what we expect them to do, and what I expect them to do is get a lot worse at the catcher position. I expect them to get significantly better in a middle infield position because I do expect them to sign one of those shortstops and then have a combination of Nico and one of those shortstops in the middle of the infield. So to me, that's roughly a wash, depending on who they sign. But losing Contreras and replacing him with an Omar Narvaez or a Christian Vazquez. Any of that will make me barf, but that and then basically replacing, Nick Madrigal or whoever you want at second, you replace that with Nico likely shifts over there, and then let's say Xander Bogaerts. I'll just say right now, if I'm making a off the top of my head predict, okay, so that's about a wash. I expect them to sign a pitcher, but I don't expect him to be top end enough for my liking. And then hopefully there's some sort of trade here, but I think I end up probably pegging my expectations for this team next year at like an 84 win, I would say.
Right.
What would you say?
Yeah, I think that in a dream scenario, they actually do what we all would want them to do and stay healthy and like win. There is absolutely no scenario in which the Cubs come into next year as a favorite or as like this team's going to win 100 games.
Right.
I don't see
No,
a
of
path
course
to
not.
that.
Yeah.
I think realistically, and I guess we'll have to see. Do we know what the playoff structure is next year? For sure.
I mean, as of right now, it's the same. I'm fairly certain
Yeah.
as this year, but there's a bunch of big rule changes coming next year too.
Right.
Where the two pickoff throws, the larger bases. These are
Right.
other reasons why I want Trey Turner as my Cubs shortstop pick. I want to see that guy steal 70 bases with the new rules.
Yeah. But yeah, I think my realistic expectations that the Cubs will put themselves in a position where if things break right, they should at least be like a wild card contender. And if things do not, they'll be, they'll win 79 games.
If they don't get a wild card spot next year, I mean, cue the Ken Schultz sound effect. I should put it on a soundboard and just play it, but fire Jed, and sell the team. It's completely unacceptable for only one team with a winning record in the National League this year didn't make the wild card. So I mean, like, and we saw the Phillies.
Yeah, and exactly. I was just gonna say the Phillies. Look what they did. So
yeah. So I mean, if you're not putting yourself in a Phillies position next year with this team, I don't know what we're playing at. I mean, in terms of expectations and in terms of holding this team to our expectations. So, yeah.
But
so
the Phillies give people money. That's the thing about the Phillies.
They do. The Phillies keep giving people a lot of money, and I mean, it worked out fine this year. They're not a juggernaut, but they're good, and they were good, and they made a run, and it would be. I think that's the baseline for what we should be hoping for next year. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's all our predicts, right?
Yeah, I mean, but hey, the Cubs were 6-0 against the team that got to the World Series out of the NL, so I guess we're already set up for success.
True that. We're ready to dominate, I think. So yeah, I mean, hopefully sometime soon here there will be obviously with Thanksgiving right now we're not. I don't expect a bunch of signings in the next couple days, but after that, hopefully things pick up a bit and we have some more actual stuff to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the last thing I would say is my big kind of weird prediction for next year is that Clark, the Cub mascot, gets caught up in a pyramid scheme. I don't know why. I just think that it's going to happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, Clark the Cub he's going to get caught up in something Ricketts-esque, and there's going to be a real long notes app apology, just like written in crayon, basically. I think is a pretty good expectation.
So just throwing it out there. You can keep the receipts, and we'll check in next year to see what's going on with Clark the Cub. But in the meantime, everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll check in with you, hopefully with some player interviews and some other fun stuff as we kind of plod through the off season. I don't know. You and I haven't talked about it. We haven't committed to anything, but it may be we'll do a podcast when it's necessary. Maybe we'll do it on a more regular basis. Who can say? But until we tell you otherwise, we'll plan to talk to you next week. And henceforth, so on and so on.
Don't unsubscribe yet, friends. Catch you later.